Welcome to the Clan MacKenzie Podcast.
Yes.
That's something that a lot of our listeners are interested in. They want to know about Septs, how that works. And I know that you and I had a brief discussion about this, and you were not familiar with the idea that maybe there's controversy. Some people think that maybe Septs are not as authentic as maybe they should be. What's your understanding of the Septs in relation to the different clans, particularly the MacKenzies?
Okay, well, I just have a small list of names, and it's by no means a complete list of the Septs that are considered Septs of Clan MacKenzie. Somewhere I do have a much, much longer one, but this one probably has 30 different names on it. And I think it's important when we look at these names that we remember a number of things. One, we need to remember the influence of the Vikings and their naming patterns. So you've got people like Donaldson is the same as MacDonald, because Mac meaning son in Gaelic of Donald, or Donaldson. It's the same family, same bunch, right?
Right.
So we have Charles and Charlesson are both Septs, if you have those names. We have a lot of names like Clunes or Cloonies and Cromarty that are names that come from places where people lived. We have to remember that people didn't all have surnames. I mean, surnames are a much more modern version. Some of the higher people may have had a surname, but the ordinary person didn't. They very often went by a name of where they were from, what their trade was, perhaps. This is why we find with the normal Scottish naming pattern, of the first son being named after the father's father, and the second one after the mother's father, and the first daughter after the mother's mother, and the second one after the father's mother, and so on, that you will find whole families with exactly the same names, with children born in the same tiny village, just about the same times. Makes it very confusing for
I was going to say, yeah, it doesn't make your job very easy as you're trying to research things.
Exactly. And you'll find out that they were cousins anyway. They all came from that same grandfather, and that's why the names are all the same.
Got it.
So we end up with a whole pile of these names that are all the same. So you've got names like Iverson and Ivory, and then you've got Kenneth from Mackenzie. Of course, that was the root. Originally, it was the son of Kenneth, and Kenneth's son, then Kenzie, and we see lots of little girls called Kenzie and Mackenzie.
Yeah.
They run up to me at events and say, "What does my name mean?" And I said, "It means you're the son of Kenneth." They go, "Oh," and I said, "But it's a really pretty girl's name too." So we just leave it at that. But things like McBailin, and you go back to the Bailin monks, so it's the son of some of them. McConaughey, again, a version of the Kenneth, not quite the same as it was in Gaelic. McIvers and McIvers and McKennas and McKennies and McKinneys and McKinseys and Mackenzies and Murchies and McMurchies and McQueenies and McVanishes and McVinnies and McWinnies and Murchisons and Smarts. I'll end up Smarts. But the reason these people have all these different names, I think, is because we need to think about society at the time. You had the laird of the manor, whether it was the chief of that or the leader of that branch of a clan, any clan, or whether it was the chief himself. And around him, you have his immediate family. And it grows, his sons marry and they have children and so on. So you have the extended family. But you also have all the support people. You've got the gameskeeper who looks after his forests and the animals to make sure that there's always enough meat on the table for all of the people that they're supporting. You have fishermen who are again supplying food. You have farmers who are supplying grain for flour and things like that. You have the taxman who was sort of an overseer, like a manager over the farmers in the tenants. You had the stable people looking after the horses, because that was very important. And then you had shoemakers and seamstresses and tailors and all those things that everybody had to have because everything was made.
Wow.
So, you start thinking you've got that community of people. who are they identifying with, and they maybe don't have a surname, so they may take the name of the laird. They may take MacKenzie as their surname. But when you do a DNA test, you find out they have no MacKenzie blood actually in their line, but they've always been known as MacKenzies because they were part of that extended family or that community group. Then you have the tenant farmers that went out from that central group. And those people, again, didn't necessarily have any surnames, but they supported that laird, that leader. If there was someone coming to steal the leader's cattle, they stood up for him and went to battle for him, or in any other skirmish or whatever it was. And in turn, that leader always looked out for those people. It was a mutually symbiotic relationship between them. It was a community, a self-sufficient community, pretty much. It would have to be in those days, those early days. And everybody worked together. And so you have people with names that came, you know, like John Black, he was the blacksmith, or John Smith, he was the blacksmith. You know, they became known by what they did.
Yeah.
So maybe Mr. Smart was an advisor to the laird and was wise. Who knows?
That sounds very plausible.
I thought so too. And I only know one other Smart, and he lives in Ontario, and he's a great supporter of the Clan MacKenzie.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard to say just where all the names came from, but I think you have to take into consideration those people traveled from one place to another to find a place where they could eke out a living sometimes. And with clearances in different areas at different times, clearances just didn't happen in a day. They happened over decades where, you know, one person decided to clear and put in sheep. Those people went and, instead of being farmers, became fishermen. Well, they didn't know how to do that very well, but some other laird might take them under the wing and help support them. And in return, they supported that laird. So to me, that would be where Septs come in.
The Clan MacKenzie Podcast is produced by Jared Smart.